Peace and grace to you, beloved child of God. Listen, there is a moment in every soul connection where truth refuses to stay hidden. A moment where the heart finally speaks louder than fear. A moment when the one who tried to stay quiet about you suddenly can't anymore. And for your soulmate, that moment came. The moment they finally confessed how they truly feel about marriage, about commitment, about what their future looks like, and why you are at the center of it. This message today is not for everyone. It is for the one who has felt the shift, the one who has sensed something stirring in the spirit, the one who has felt a pull that is deeper than emotion and stronger than logic. Because when God begins to deal with someone's heart, when He begins to expose the truth they tried to avoid, when He begins to reveal the person they are meant to build with, nothing stays the same. And something in you knows that. You can feel that what is happening in your life right now is not random, not accidental, not a coincidence, not a passing feeling. This is divine alignment. This is revelation. This is clarity that has been waiting to unfold. Your soulmate has been wrestling with questions, wrestling with timing, wrestling with uncertainty, wrestling with commitment, wrestling with the idea of marriage. Not because they didn't want it, but because they didn't feel ready for what a covenant requires. But something shifted. Something broke open. Something reached them in a way nothing else ever had. Something confronted their fear, their hesitation, their guardedness. And that something was you. Your presence, your patience, your spirit, your softness, your strength, your sincerity, your depth, your love. They finally confessed the truth, not just about how they feel, but about why they didn't move sooner, why they held back, why they struggled, why they ran, why they resisted what they actually wanted, and what they admitted changes everything. Because the truth they were afraid to say is the truth their soul couldn't hide anymore. They realize they want marriage. They realize they want commitment. They realize they want stability. They realize they want a future with clarity. They realize they want a partner who grows with them. And they realize that you are the only person who awakened that desire. This video is going to take you into the 7 revelations that led them to that confession. 7 moments of awareness. 7 emotional breakthroughs. 7 truths about you that they could no longer escape. These next minutes will open your eyes, heal areas of confusion, confirm what your intuition already whispered, and reveal why this connection feels so spiritually charged, so emotionally deep, so divinely orchestrated. If you are new here, I want to welcome you with love. And if these teachings speak to your spirit, they bring clarity, if they confirm what you've been feeling, make sure you subscribe, because this channel is here to guide you, to strengthen you, to help you navigate love with wisdom and truth. And if this message resonates with you at any point, if it touches your heart, if it brings healing, if it restores your hope, you can support this channel with a super thanks, and bless the work that keeps these teachings flowing to millions. Now breathe, settle your heart, open your spirit, because the truth your soulmate finally admitted will not only bring understanding, it will bring alignment, it will bring closure where you need it, and restoration where your heart has been waiting. Let's begin. Number 1, they finally admitted they were afraid of choosing wrong because you felt too right. There is a fear that destroys more relationships than rejection ever could. A fear people rarely admit out loud. A fear of choosing the wrong person. A fear of getting it wrong again. A fear of repeating the same heartbreak, the same disappointment, the same emotional disaster that shaped who they became. Your soulmate carried this fear quietly, silently, for years, long before they met you, long before they even knew your name. Long before they understood what real connection felt like. They were afraid of choosing wrong. But what they never expected was to be afraid of choosing right. Because you felt right. Too right. Uncomfortably right. Right in a way that exposed all the places in them that were not ready for healthy love. Right in a way that forced them to confront the parts of themselves they had buried. Right in a way that left them emotionally naked. Bare. Seen. Exposed. You were not like the people they entertained before. You were not like the connections that kept things shallow. You were not like the interactions that fed their ego but never touched their soul. You were different, and your difference terrified them. They confessed that choosing you felt like stepping into a life they had prayed for, but never believed they deserved. You felt like answered prayer. An answered prayer can be just as terrifying as heartbreak, because answered prayer requires responsibility, healing, maturity, growth, honesty, courage, and they were not sure they had that yet. Not sure they could hold someone like you. Not sure they could be consistent. Not sure they could lead with confidence. Not sure they could love without fear. Not sure they could stay instead of flee. They admitted that you awakened something in them they did not expect. You stirred their spirit. You stirred their desire to be better. You stirred their longing for partnership. You stirred their hunger for covenant. You stirred their hope for marriage. You stirred the part of them that still believed in destiny. And that scared them more than anything. Because choosing you meant choosing a future. Choosing growth. Choosing stability. Choosing emotional presence. Choosing commitment. Choosing a love that would require real vulnerability. They had been used to connections that required nothing. No accountability. No depth. No honesty. No sacrifice. No self-awareness. But you required truth. Not with pressure. Not with demands. But with your purity. Your sincerity. Your presence. Your energy. You being yourself challenged everything they had allowed themselves to accept before. They confessed this. They said you made them realize just how low they had set the bar for their own heart. How much they had tolerated. How deeply they had been settling. How much they were shrinking themselves. How long they had been playing small in love. You made them want to rise. To grow. To evolve. To heal. To become the person God intended. Not the person their past molded. And that spiritual awakening terrified them. Because choosing you meant choosing a new life. A life with responsibility. A life where they had to show up. A life where they had to be emotionally present. A life where they could not run when fear came. A life where they could not hide when intimacy deepened. They finally admitted this. They said the reason they hesitated, the reason they pulled back, the reason they felt overwhelmed, was because they never imagined they would meet someone who made them face themselves. You were the mirror they avoided for years. You reflected their potential, but you also reflected their wounds, their unhealed fears, their insecurities, their emotional avoidance, their internal conflict, and while that scared them, it also awakened them, because whenever they imagined marriage, whenever they imagined partnership, whenever they imagined choosing someone to build life with, your name came to their spirit, your face came to their mind, your presence came to their heart. Even when they tried to suppress it, even when they tried to ignore it, even when they tried to distract themselves, the thought of you returned, not as fantasy, not as obsession, but as truth. Choosing you would not have been wrong. Choosing you would not have been a mistake. Choosing you would not have been another painful cycle. Choosing you would have been alignment, confirmation, purpose, destiny. They finally admitted this. They were not afraid you were wrong. They were afraid you were right. And that truth changed everything. Because now they are no longer running from the right choice. They are running toward it. Number 2, they confessed that you revealed the difference between wanting marriage and being ready for marriage. There is a difference between wanting marriage and being ready for marriage. A difference many people never acknowledge. A difference your soulmate never understood. Until they met you. They confessed this. They admitted they had always said they wanted a committed relationship. They said they wanted partnership. They said they wanted a future. They said they wanted stability. But they didn't truly know what readiness required. Not until your presence exposed the gap between desire and preparation. Because wanting marriage is emotional. But being ready for marriage is spiritual. Wanting marriage is exciting. But being ready for marriage is humbling. Wanting marriage is about longing. But being ready for marriage is about responsibility. And your presence forced them to see this truth. For the first time, they could feel the difference between craving love and being capable of sustaining love. They realized marriage is not built on romance alone. It's built on character, consistency, emotional honesty, self-awareness, healing, communication, sacrifice, accountability. And when they looked at you, when they felt the purity of your heart, when they recognized the depth of your spirit, when they saw the level of love you offered. They had to face something they had avoided for years. They were not prepared to be the partner you deserved. They confessed this. They admitted that your presence highlighted their emotional gaps, their spiritual immaturity, their inconsistency, their avoidance, their fear of vulnerability, their unhealed habits, their lack of discipline, their scattered mindset. And instead of pretending, instead of hiding behind charm, instead of masking with confidence, instead of covering it with casual energy, they had to face themselves. You exposed the difference between a relationship they could coast through and a covenant they would have to grow through. You didn't pressure them. You didn't demand perfection. You didn't ask for more than they could give. You simply showed up as your whole self, and that forced them to realize they could not offer you anything less than their whole self in return. They saw how intentional you were, how emotionally aware you were, how spiritually grounded you were, how much you had healed, how much you had outgrown, how much you had matured, how deeply you could love, and how softly you could carry someone else's heart. And they knew instantly that half effort would not work with you. That emotional laziness would not work with you. That inconsistency would not work with you. That broken patterns would not work with you. That old habits would not work with you. You brought a level of emotional clarity they had never experienced, and it awakened something sacred in them. A desire to rise, a desire to be better, a desire to match your energy, a desire to grow into the person who could lead a home, not just love a partner. They confessed that before you. Marriage was just an idea, a dream, a desire, a romantic fantasy, something distant, something they would figure out later. But after meeting you, marriage became real, became urgent, it became meaningful. It became something their spirit knew they were called to, not just something their emotions wanted, but something their soul recognized. You shifted their understanding. You elevated their mindset. You clarified their purpose. They realized that marriage is not a title. It is a calling. And choosing you would require stepping into that calling. With strength, with consistency, with discipline, with emotional presence, with spiritual maturity. And they were not there yet. But here is the part they admitted that changed everything. You didn't make them feel inadequate. You made them feel inspired. You made them feel hopeful. You made them feel capable. You made them feel chosen. You made them feel worthy of stepping into the best version of themselves. You awakened the part of them that wanted to grow. They confessed this. They said your presence created a hunger for healing, a hunger for responsibility, a hunger for commitment, a hunger for stability, a hunger for real love. You didn't just show them what marriage looks like. You showed them what marriage requires. You became the mirror, the guide, the clarity, the conviction. And because of you, they can no longer settle for relationships that lack depth. They can no longer hide behind fear. They can no longer pretend they are not called to more. Your presence moved them from wanting marriage to being ready to prepare for marriage. And that shift changed everything. Number 3, they confessed that you triggered a level of growth they tried to avoid for years. There are 2 kinds of people we meet in life. People who fit our comfort, and people who confront our growth. You were the second. You were the one who confronted the places in them that comfort had been protecting. You were the one who awakened the version of themselves they kept delaying. You were the one who made them face emotional truths they had been avoiding. And they finally confessed this. They admitted that you didn't trigger their fear. You triggered their growth. And growth is one of the most uncomfortable experiences a person can face. Because growth requires honesty. Growth requires responsibility. Growth requires self-awareness. Growth requires humility. Growth requires breaking old patterns. Growth requires letting go of old coping mechanisms. Growth requires maturity. Growth requires healing. And they had spent years avoiding exactly that. They had built routines around avoidance. They had built relationships around emotional detachment. They had built habits around numbing. They had built walls around vulnerability. They had built a life that allowed them to stay unchallenged. Then you showed up, and everything shifted. Your presence didn't attack them. It revealed them. Your love didn't pressure them. It exposed them. Your clarity didn't intimidate them. It awakened them. You made them see the difference between who they were and who they were called to become. Not because you demanded it, but because your spirit made it impossible for them to stay the same. They confessed that you challenged their emotional patterns. Without trying, you challenged their silence, their distance, their inconsistency, their excuses, their fear of vulnerability, their fear of commitment, their habit of withdrawing when emotions get real. You challenge them simply by being you, by being emotionally present, by being honest, by being intentional, by being grounded, by being healed, by being spiritually connected. They said your presence made them examine everything: how they communicate, how they shut down, how they love, how they pull away, how they self-protect, how they self-sabotage. And that kind of inner confrontation was overwhelming, because for years, they found people who let them stay small, people who let them stay guarded, people who let them get away with minimal effort, people who let them operate from their trauma, people who never required them to heal. But you were the exception. You brought a standard, an energy, a purity, a maturity, a depth, a presence, a love, that made them realize they couldn't stay who they were. Not if they wanted to stand beside you. Not if they wanted to love you correctly. Not if they wanted to build a future with you. You made them want to ascend. Emotionally, spiritually, mentally, relationally. You made them want to show up fully. Not halfway. Not inconsistently. Not fearfully. But authentically. Boldly. Responsibly. They confessed they had been putting off their healing. Putting off their growth. Putting off their accountability. Putting off becoming the person God intended, because no one had required it, until you became the wake-up call, the spiritual alarm, the emotional mirror, the voice they didn't know they needed, the presence they didn't know would transform them. You triggered a longing for growth, a hunger for healing, a desire for alignment, a push toward maturity, and for someone who had been avoiding these things for years, it scared them. It overwhelmed them. It stretched them. It forced reflection, forced honesty, but it also awakened hope. It awakened vision. It awakened determination. It awakened purpose, because for the first time, they saw a future worth growing for, a future worth healing for, a future worth maturing for, a future worth becoming better for, and that future was with you. They confessed they weren't running from you. They were running from the version of themselves they didn't want to face. But the more they tried to avoid it, the more your presence illuminated it, the more your energy exposed it, the more your spirit revealed it, the more your love made them want to rise. You were not just a romantic connection. You were a catalyst. You were a turning point. You were the beginning of their becoming. And now, they can no longer hide from the growth they avoided. They can no longer stay in the shallow parts of themselves. They can no longer pretend they don't know what God is calling them into, because you shifted them. You stretched them. You awakened them. You changed them. They confessed it. They are growing. Because of you. Number 4, they confessed that your love showed them what covenant actually means. Covenant is a word people use casually, but very few understand its weight, its responsibility, its depth, its sacredness. Your soulmate confessed that before you. They had a surface-level understanding of love. They knew affection. They knew attraction. They knew connection. But they did not know covenant. Not until you. Because covenant is not built on feelings. Covenant is not built on butterflies. Covenant is not built on convenience. Covenant is not built on ego. Covenant is not built on temporary desire. Covenant is built on commitment. Covenant is built on consistency. Covenant is built on sacrifice. Covenant is built on truth. Covenant is built on accountability. Covenant is built on spiritual alignment. Covenant is built on choosing someone, even on the days when emotion feels quiet. And you, through your presence, through your heart, through your spirit, through the way you show up, revealed what covenant love truly looks like. They confessed they had never experienced anything like that. Not from their past. Not from their childhood. Not from their previous relationships. Not from the people they entertained before they met you. You were the first person who showed them love with intention. Love with depth. Love with alignment. Love with faith. Love with responsibility. Love with emotional maturity. Your love wasn't reckless. Your love wasn't manipulative. Your love wasn't chaotic. Your love wasn't inconsistent. Your love was steady. Your love was clear. Your love was genuine. Your love was grounded. Your love was patient. Your love was honest. You didn't chase. You didn't force. You didn't demand position. You didn't beg for effort. You didn't compete for space. You didn't try to earn what was already aligned. You simply loved from a healed place. And that kind of love is powerful, rare, transformative. They had never been loved like that. So they didn't know how to receive it. They didn't know how to honor it. They didn't know how to match it. Because your love wasn't familiar. Your love was divine. Your love was intentional. Your love was mature. Your love was kingdom-minded. And that terrified them. Because covenant love exposes where a person still needs to grow. Where they need to heal. Where they need to mature. Where they need to take responsibility. They confessed this. They admitted that your love made them reconsider everything they believed about relationships. It made them question the dysfunctional patterns they once normalized. It made them confront the ways they had been moving. It made them rethink what partnership really means. Because you didn't offer a temporary connection. You offered depth. You offered alignment. You offered growth. You offered patience. You offered clarity. And when someone has never experienced that, they don't know what to do with it. Your love made them think about legacy. Your love made them think about family. Your love made them think about the long term. Your love made them think about becoming a better version of themselves. This is why their confession came with weight. Because they realized marriage with you wouldn't be a title. It would be a covenant, a divine partnership, a sacred union, a spiritual assignment. You weren't just a lover. You were a destiny partner. You weren't just someone they liked. You were someone their spirit recognized. And this level of clarity overwhelmed them. Not because they didn't want marriage, but because you redefined what marriage meant. Marriage was no longer a concept. It was a calling. Marriage was no longer something casual. It was something holy. Marriage was no longer a romantic idea. It was a responsibility. Marriage was no longer a distant dream. It was something they felt in their spirit. And they realized, choosing you would require them to elevate, to grow, to become grounded, to become steady, to become intentional, to become emotionally mature, to become spiritually aligned. You exposed what covenant requires, not by teaching, not by lecturing, not by demanding, but simply by being who you are. Your presence revealed the blueprint. Your love revealed the standard. Your spirit revealed the calling. They confessed that your love didn't give them butterflies. It gave them vision. It gave them clarity. It gave them a future. It gave them purpose. And once someone sees what covenant truly looks like, there is no going back. No settling. No pretending. No replacing. No detaching. Your love introduced them to a new level of relationship. And now, there is no returning to the old. Number 5. They confessed that losing you showed them the cost of emotional immaturity. There are lessons people avoid for years. Lessons they refuse to confront. Lessons they choose to ignore. Until life removes the one person they never wanted to lose. And suddenly, the truth becomes undeniable. Your soulmate confessed this. They said losing you was the moment everything snapped into focus. The moment the fog lifted. The moment the excuses fell apart. The moment emotional immaturity revealed its true cost. Because emotional immaturity is not always loud. Sometimes it is subtle. Sometimes it hides behind silence. Sometimes it hides behind delayed responses. Sometimes it hides behind avoidance. Sometimes it hides behind fear disguised as logic. Sometimes it hides behind waiting for the perfect time. A time that never comes. Your soulmate realized they were emotionally immature in ways they didn't recognize before. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't understand how to show care. Not because they didn't feel deeply, but because they didn't know how to communicate depth. Not because they didn't want you, but because they didn't know how to hold someone like you. And losing you revealed all of it. They confessed that when you pulled back, when you grew quiet, when you stopped carrying the emotional load, when you stopped initiating connection, when you stopped making everything easier for them, they felt the absence immediately, not just in their heart, but in their spirit, in their routine, in their peace. Your presence made life feel supported. Your absence made life feel unsteady. They realized emotional immaturity has a cost. The cost is losing someone who was patient, losing someone who was genuine, losing someone who was emotionally available, losing someone who was willing to grow with them, losing someone who offered clarity, losing someone who saw their potential, losing someone who wanted to love them correctly. Your soulmate admitted that they thought they had more time. They thought you would wait. They thought you would always be the one to reach out, to forgive, to understand, to overextend, to carry both sides of the connection. They didn't realize that your heart had limits, that your strength needed reciprocity, that your love needed partnership, that your soul needed safety. They confessed that when you stopped giving what you used to give, that is when they saw their immaturity, not as a personality trait, but as a damaging pattern. A pattern that pushed away the one person they actually wanted to keep. They realized emotional immaturity doesn't just hurt relationships. It destroys them. Slowly, quietly, subtly, until there is nothing left but regret. They felt that regret. It hit them harder than they expected, because for the first time, they understood the difference between losing someone temporarily and losing someone because of their own lack of effort. Your absence confronted them. It confronted their procrastination. It confronted their excuses. It confronted their detachment. It confronted their fear. It confronted their avoidance. It confronted their inability to communicate. Your absence became the teacher they avoided, the mirror they needed, the wake-up call they resisted, the lesson they could no longer outrun. They confessed that emotionally immature decisions temporarily protect a person, but permanently cost them what matters most. They admitted that losing you felt like losing a blessing, a divine gift, a partner their spirit recognized, a love they didn't feel worthy of, a connection they underestimated, a presence they took for granted. And that realization broke them open. It humbled them. It awakened them. It matured them in ways they didn't expect. They began seeing their patterns everywhere. The lack of initiative, the lack of clarity, the lack of emotional presence, the lack of accountability, the fear of commitment, the fear of conversations, the fear of vulnerability. They finally understood these patterns weren't protecting them. These patterns were sabotaging them. And for the first time, they felt the weight of responsibility. They felt the consequences of emotional immaturity. They felt the pain of self-sabotage. They felt the cost of what they lost. But here is what changed everything. They didn't just feel regret. They felt conviction. They felt responsibility. They felt the urgency to grow, to heal, to mature, to become someone capable of offering what you offered freely. They confessed that losing you didn't just break their heart. It awakened it, matured it, it strengthened it, it aligned it. You became the turning point they didn't see coming, the lesson they never expected, the blessing they didn't know how to hold, the person who showed them the true cost of staying emotionally immature. And now, they can never go back to who they were. Not after losing you. Not after seeing the truth. Not after feeling the weight of what immaturity cost them. Your absence became the doorway to their transformation. A transformation they never would have chosen, but a transformation they desperately needed. Number 6. They confessed they finally understand why their spirit couldn't detach from you. Your soulmate confessed something they've never admitted to anyone. Not to friends. Not to family. Not even to themselves fully. Until the truth became too strong to ignore. They confessed that no matter how far they tried to run, no matter how distracted they tried to become, no matter who they tried to replace you with, no matter how busy they pretended to be, their spirit could not detach from you. They said it was confusing, uncomfortable, irritating at times, even frightening, because they didn't understand why their mind could rationalize letting go. Their ego could pretend they were over it. Their emotions could go quiet for a moment, But their spirit, their deeper self, never released you. And for the longest time, they didn't know why. They tried to logic their way out of it. They tried to convince themselves it wasn't that deep. They tried to tell themselves the connection was over, that the timing was off, that the circumstances weren't right, that it was better to move on, better to let go, better to detach. But their spirit didn't cooperate. Their spirit remembered you. Their spirit reached for you. Their spirit stayed connected to you. Even when their actions didn't. Even when their behavior didn't. Even when their maturity didn't. They said they would feel you out of nowhere. Feel your energy. Feel your presence. Feel your absence. Feel your shift. Feel when you were hurting. Feel when you were healing. Feel when you were pulling away. Feel when you were growing stronger. It wasn't anxiety. It wasn't obsession. It wasn't overthinking. It was spiritual resonance. Something in them knew. This connection wasn't ordinary. This wasn't a typical attraction. This wasn't a temporary bond. This wasn't a short-lived connection. This was soul recognition. They confessed it terrified them. Because they couldn't shut it off. They couldn't silence it. They couldn't escape it. They couldn't distract themselves from it. And the more distance there was between you, the louder it became. They said they didn't fully understand the spiritual side of relationships before you. They didn't understand how someone's presence could stabilize them, how someone's voice could calm them, how someone's energy could realign them, how someone's absence could disrupt them on a soul level. They didn't understand how connection could be both a blessing and a mirror, how it could inspire them and confront them, how it could soften them and challenge them, how it could feel peaceful, yet so intense it forced them to face parts of themselves they would rather avoid. They confessed they finally understand why they couldn't detach. It's because your role in their life wasn't temporary. It wasn't random. It wasn't superficial. It wasn't accidental. You were a spiritual assignment. Your presence activated something in them they didn't know existed. Something ancient. Something familiar. Something divine. Something destined. You awakened parts of their heart they weren't ready to face. Parts they didn't know how to express. Parts they didn't know how to honor. Parts they weren't mature enough to handle. And losing you didn't dissolve that. If anything, it amplified it. They realized your connection wasn't tied to convenience. It wasn't tied to consistent communication. It wasn't tied to physical presence. It wasn't tied to titles. The connection existed on a deeper level. A soul level. A spiritual level. A level they never experienced with anyone else. They confessed it humbled them. Because they finally understood. What they were feeling wasn't emotional weakness. It was spiritual alignment. They finally understood why they felt drawn to you. Why they couldn't replace you. Why they kept comparing others to you. Why they felt restless when you were gone. Why they felt peace when they imagined a future with you. Why every conversation with you lingered for days. Why every memory with you carried weight. Why every moment with you felt purposeful. Because your soul left an imprint on theirs. A mark that time could not erase. A mark that distance could not weaken. A mark that confusion could not undo. They confessed they were afraid of the connection at first. Because they had never experienced anything like it. Never felt such depth. Never felt such truth. Never felt such recognition. But now, instead of running, they're awakening. They're understanding. They're accepting. They finally see why their spirit held on. Why their heart didn't move on. Why their soul kept calling your name. Because in a world full of temporary connections, you were the one connection that was spiritually real, spiritually aligned, spiritually undeniable. And now, they can no longer pretend otherwise. Number 7. They confess they're ready to love you in a way they never could before. Your soulmate confessed something that took them months, maybe even years, to finally understand, to finally accept, to finally admit out loud. They confessed that they were not capable of loving you the first time, not at the level you deserved, not at the level your spirit required, not at the level your heart needed. They were drawn to you, moved by you, connected to you, but they were not ready for you, not ready for your depth, not ready for your consistency, not ready for your emotional maturity, not ready for your honesty, Not ready for your standards. Not ready for the way you spoke life. Not ready for the way you loved from a healed place. Not ready for the way your presence held weight. Not ready for the kind of relationship you were built for. They confessed they didn't understand the responsibility that comes with a person like you. A person with purpose. A person with spiritual clarity. A person with emotional strength. A person with discernment. A person who doesn't settle. A person who doesn't chase. A person who knows their worth. A person who isn't afraid of commitment. A person who knows what real partnership looks like. They were intimidated, overwhelmed, quietly insecure. Not because you demanded too much, but because you required authenticity, required truth, required communication, required growth, required real effort. Your standards weren't controlling. They were clarifying. They exposed where they were lacking. They exposed where they needed healing. They exposed where they were still operating from survival, where they still relied on avoidance, where they still used silence as protection, where they still confused peace with emotional shutdown. They confessed that you were not too much. You were too real, too pure, too aligned, too intentional, too spiritually grounded, for the version of themselves they were when they first crossed paths with you. But now something has shifted. Something has awakened. Something has matured. Something has settled inside them. They confessed they are finally ready. Ready in ways they could not have been back then. Ready in ways they never thought they would be. Ready in ways that feel grounding. Not chaotic. Not impulsive. Not confusing. They said they now understand the kind of love you require. And they are prepared to give it. Not partially. Not inconsistently. Not only when convenient, but wholeheartedly. They confessed they learned what presence means, what effort means, what communication means, what emotional openness means, what partnership means, what accountability means, what commitment means, what spiritual alignment means. Not because someone else taught them, but because losing you forced them to confront what they had ignored. For years, for relationships, for patterns, for cycles. They grew, they healed, they matured. They confronted their shadows. They broke emotional habits they used to hide behind. They learned how to apologize, how to express, how to articulate, how to choose someone intentionally. They confessed they know exactly what they want now. Not almost, not maybe, not eventually, clearly, directly, fully. And what they want is you. Not the version of you they once knew, but the evolved you, the healed you, the stronger you, the more self-aware you, the more spiritually grounded you, the more confident you. They see your worth now, not vaguely, not halfway, not through fear, but with certainty. They confess they are ready to pursue you, ready to show up for you, ready to talk openly, ready to choose you consistently, ready to give effort without being pushed, ready to offer clarity without being asked, ready to love you in ways they couldn't before. Not because you changed, but because they did. They confessed that the time apart didn't weaken the connection. It refined it, purified it, matured it. You weren't the problem. You were the mirror. And now that they've grown, they can finally love you from a place of truth, not fear, not immaturity, not confusion. They confess they're ready, ready to honor you, ready to commit, ready to show up, ready to build, ready to speak, ready to love intentionally. And for the first time, they're not scared of the responsibility. They're not avoiding the vulnerability. They're not running from the connection. They are stepping into it, fully, boldly, willingly, because now, they're not just in love with you. They are prepared for you, prepared for the weight, prepared for the depth, prepared for the calling, prepared for the covenant. They confessed, this time, they are ready to love you right. What you just heard wasn't coincidence. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't false hope. This was clarity. This was alignment. This was a spiritual shift that you were meant to understand. Your soulmate finally confessing the truth about marriage is not a small moment. It is a turning point, a spiritual signal, a doorway God is opening, a sign that everything you've been praying for, crying for, waiting for, healing for, is now stepping out of the shadows and into form. This confession didn't happen overnight. It didn't come from pressure. It didn't come from fear. It came from awakening. It came from growth. It came from the realization that love, real love, cannot stay silent forever. Your soulmate's heart is maturing. Their vision is clearing. Their spirit is aligning. And their understanding of marriage is no longer shaped by fear, trauma, or hesitation. It is being shaped by purpose, responsibility, and truth. And here's what you must hold on to. When someone speaks honestly about marriage, they are revealing their readiness. They are revealing their intentions. They are revealing the future they see. They are revealing the weight they're willing to carry. They are revealing how deeply they value the connection they have with you. This confession is not just information. It is transformation. It is a sign that God is preparing both of you for something sacred, something stable, something aligned. Your spirit felt this long before you heard it. That's why you've been more sensitive. That's why your emotions have been rising. That's why your intuition has been whispering. Because heaven always prepares the heart before it prepares the moment. This is not the season to shrink. This is not the season to question your worth. This is not the season to let fear speak louder than faith. This is the season to walk in alignment, to open your heart wisely, to stand in the truth of your value, and to prepare for the kind of love that is built to last. Your soulmate's confession is evidence that the story is shifting. The connection is deepening. The future is taking shape. You are stepping into a chapter where clarity replaces confusion, where movement replaces stagnation, where truth replaces guessing, where alignment replaces fear. And if this message has spoken to your soul today, if you felt confirmation, if you felt clarity, if you felt God tugging at something inside you, then I want to invite you to become part of this family. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on your notifications. Join this community of healing, spiritual growth, and divine clarity. Here on Daily Motivation Prayers, we pour into you with intention. We show up for your heart. We speak to your spirit. We guide you through love, purpose, and emotional wholeness. And your support allows these messages to reach more people who are hurting, confused, or searching for answers just like you. If this video blessed you, if it strengthened you, if it helped you breathe deeper, consider tapping the super thanks button to support the channel. Your kindness means more than you know. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with an open heart. Thank you for supporting this family. Your story is not finished. Your soulmate is awakening. And God is aligning the next chapter of your life with precision and purpose. Stay encouraged. Stay grounded. Stay ready. Because everything is changing. And it's changing in your favor. Amen.